It's us again. Another week's gone by, and here we are again, sitting around, chatting, fixing the world's problems, and having a good drink. We're still in stage 4 lockdown, so we are recording this in the middle of the afternoon, so that we're home safe and sound by 6 p.m. Gents, what are we drinking this week? Tinashe, in your ice cream colored pants.
Well, I thought I'd try something that Rufaro recommended. So maybe Rufaro can actually speak more to it. But so far, it's okay. It's a medium roast. I usually like mine dark and not medium, but I'll try it out today.
Yeah, me and George drink this all the time. It's locally produced by Tanganda, and I'm quite enamored with it. I hope you like it.
Yeah, very aromatic, very creamy, medium roast. I'm actually a little bit sad that Tanganda is shifting their business from tea and coffee to other things, and I worry that perhaps we may not be able to enjoy this in coming years.
So we better stock up then.
Yep.
Hey, I'm not going to be accused of market manipulation. Rufaro, what are you having?
Well, we are having a triple cask Macallan today, courtesy of a mutual friend of ours.
Namesake of mine?
Yes, namesake of yours, George Guatizo. He runs a solar business that installs solar panels, inverters, and batteries. And I think, in fact...
called Valsa?
It's called Valsa. And I should mention that this George, being the accountant that he is, had a small project to install solar, and he got a bunch of quotes, and he chose to quietly go with somebody significantly cheaper than the other George.
Yes.
Needless to say, he got what he paid for, and a few weeks later, he had to go to Valsa to get bailed out.
Yes, I had to pay George to fix my mistake.
As a customer of Valsa, do you have any comments on the quality of
No, he fixed my mistake, and I'm generally happy, and I'm very grateful for the whiskey.
Cheers, George.
Cheers to George. As usual, we're going to take a tour through various news stories this week. And we're really talking about things we don't know anything about, and people should just contextualize our discussion. Given that we're trying to get to the bottom of a bottle of whiskey before the end of the show, they shouldn't take us too seriously. If they do, they probably need a bottle of whiskey themselves. Obviously, the main issue this week, gentlemen, that a lot of people on the street are talking about is this new $50 note. Is it a big deal, given that we're transacting electronically anyway? Should we really be talking about it?
Well, I think we should. Besides picking up one or two jokes around it, and I think Zimbabwe is a very funny individuals. I've seen some really interesting. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But I think it raises a number of issues. So the first one is there an effect moving from RTGS to actual notes and coins? If you look at the notes and coins, just for our audience and for us to contextualize, it's we have 3.8 billion worth of notes and coins, and the total money supply is, for Zim dollars, it's 100 billion. So that's about 3.8%.
And so this is a roughly 10% increase in the stock of notes and coins.
10% increase, but ideally we should be around 15% of our GDP, 15-20%.
Well, what would that be? So we've got 3.8 billion. What would be 10?
So if you do it the other way around, which is in US dollars, that's about 26 million US dollars.
But why is that ideal?
Well, hang on. So we've got 26 million current stock, and we're moving to about 28, 29 million current stock. What should we have?
We should have about let's call it $2 billion US worth of stock.
Okay. And so then comes to Farah's question.
Yeah.
Who says it should be 2 billion worth of stock?
Well, it should ideally, remember when you have a stock of money, it's to serve the public. It's for the public's convenience, right? So the central bank is the issuer of currency. And the reason why it's an issuer of currency is so that you can facilitate trade and you can facilitate commerce between individuals. It's a medium of exchange.
Yeah, but look, we're in the 21st century.
If it fails to be a medium of exchange, then it becomes very difficult. So the idea of us being in the 21st century, so pick any country and I will tell you what sort of cash they have.
So, okay,
but I think
so I want to give you a very specific example, and because my view on this is that it's a failure and it's a missed opportunity. So a few years ago, Kenya decided, because they had a problem with their equivalent of combis. They used to collect most of their revenue in cash. They never paid any taxes, and they used to incessantly bribe the police with cash. But with the emergence of their equivalent of EcoCash, M-Pesa, which had universal adoption pretty much, the government decided that every combi over there can no longer collect cash, right? They would need to collect their revenue via M-Pesa, and the government would collect the presumptive tax based on a review of the activity in their
M-Pesa account.
M-Pesa account, right? And because it was illegal for them to actually receive cash, they were not in a position to bribe the police. So this was actually a very progressive step forward, right? So you're broadening the tax net,
base, increasing transparency.
Absolutely, and you're reducing corruption, right? So we, because of the cash issues that we've had, so you can look at it as a problem to say there isn't enough cash in circulation, so let's issue more notes, right? Or you can say this is an opportunity to actually move to the next paradigm where we become a cashless society, where every transaction in this economy has an audit trail, and we are at the cutting edge of the technology of money, right? So why are we, and this is something that we seem to do all the time, right? If we're going to have cash in the economy, let's be like any other country that has cash. They have denominations from coins for less than $1 and denominations up to $50, $100, right? And it works. If you want to transact in cash, you can transact in cash, right?
In Europe, you get 200 euro note. That's like almost
so our highest denomination note, if you use the official rate, right, it's less than $1, right? So are we serious
to take a combi?
Exactly. Are we serious about people being able to transact in cash?
Well, you've made two arguments, and we need to separate the arguments. So your first argument goes against the idea or the notion of money as a medium of exchange. Because when you look at the economic structure of Zimbabwe, we have people who actually live in the rural areas and
who don't have phones.
Who don't have phones.
No, they've got EcoCash.
Who don't.
People in the rural areas use EcoCash.
A lot of people use cash. If you look at the US dollars in the rural areas, a lot of them actually use US dollar cash. So there is an affinity. And the point I'm trying to make is it's not up to you as a policymaker or as armchair analysts to decide.
Armchair. We are real business people.
To decide the medium of exchange, right? And remember, the whole purpose of why we have a central bank is it's an issue of currency. So let's be very clear about that. And you're quite right in terms of innovation and everything that you can do around electronic money that you cannot do. But let's be clear that at least those who choose to carry their money as cash, that cash must be available.
But you know,
so is a $50 not serious in that context?
So that's why I say you have two arguments, and I just wanted us to first make those arguments very clear. So to your second argument, which I totally agree. So I might have disagreed with you on the first argument. I totally agree with your second argument, which is if it's a medium of exchange, and if we want to help the people, then why shouldn't we have a $500 note if you really think about it, the $2 note and the $5 note are irrelevant in our economy.
You don't see them anymore.
We actually, because people have just thrown them.
Do you even remember
away.
a bond coin?
Yeah, exactly. And what we need to do is to literally decommission them, and we must have higher.
Oh, we shouldn't bother decommissioning them. The cost.
They've decommissioned themselves.
Yeah.
But Tinashe, you're constantly reminding us that we elect policymakers and they make policies. In this particular case, what is wrong, if you go with Rufaro's argument, that the elected policymakers have decided to make Zimbabwe a cashless economy? Is it a negative thing?
Yes, it is. It is a negative thing in the sense that it's not responding to the market. If the market tells you that we want to use cash,
the market said you guys can run the country for 5 years.
But your question is disingenuous because our society is not cashless, right? They haven't even attempted to make our society cashless. They are pretending that there is cash, right? Because I can't think of any jurisdiction on God's green earth where the highest denomination note is less than $1. Can you?
No.
So are they serious about saying that they're making cash available?
Or a cashless society.
So, but maybe that's a general policy direction to eventually get rid of
financial inclusion. When you look at financial inclusion, most of our people are actually not in the financial system. We have the National Metros Bank, and they have quite a bit of US dollar cash that is moving and does a lot.
I beg to differ with you. I think we've got great financial inclusion. EcoCash has more than 9 million accounts, which we have mobile wallet penetration in this country that is probably in the top 10 globally. So we actually have solved this problem, right? People know how to transact.
You know that
people were transacting.
You know that EcoCash has a limit, right?
Yes, but the people are included.
Yeah,
they're included in the financial system. Yes, and I know you're going to argue about the National Mattress Bank and their preference for US dollars, but they're included. They don't like, or they have reasons for not using that currency and they prefer another currency. But if they could do the EcoCash transactions in their preferred currency, they'd still use EcoCash. And we know that from 6 or 7 years ago.
And the reason why we don't have a lot of transactions...
Just to follow through with Jude's argument. So what's your point?
That you can't say there's no financial inclusion.
No. I didn't say there is no financial inclusion. I'm saying to the extent that the market has freely chosen to be financially included, there are people who still trade in cash. And what we need to do, if you're a policymaker, going back to your original argument, was the policymaker must say, well, we have EcoCash, we have cash, and we have all this, and let the market determine.
Yeah, but we live in an economy in which the policymaker is pretending to be an advocate of free markets, but actually espouses...
We're going back to this road again.
Espouses command economics. No. So that's the reality.
Maybe just moving it on a little bit. So I think what we do all agree on is the new $50 note can't pay for a Zupco, it can't pay for a loaf of bread. Forget about a beer, forget about a super. In fact, I'm not quite sure what you can pay for it. Maybe you can buy a Coke. Maybe with it. I don't know what a Coke costs.
You know what? It does bring a bit of convenience if you think about it.
But okay. Well, let me just complete my question, right? So I don't know how much Coke costs. Maybe you do. But I think maybe that's about the only thing you can pay for with it. Now, if the point is to bring convenience and so on, rationally we'd all say, well, maybe they should go for a note 10 times the size or 20 times the size. But the guys in the building behind me have clearly decided not to. Why?
Because it turns out that when we do calculate money supply and the stock of money, there's this thing called velocity of money. And once you have cash in the economy, it has a greater velocity than when it's electronic. So if you think about it, the amount of times your EcoCash does the round, it's far less than the amount of times that...
is that a fact?
Yeah, that's a fact. A proven fact everywhere.
Well, is that a fact in this country?
I think,
studies have been done.
I think that more likely because we have a 2% transactional tax, right? If we actually made it convenient for people to do the vast majority of their transactions in cash, then
the government would lose revenue.
Absolutely. So they have a perverse incentive to make people transact electronically, right? So, which is why they're not serious about cash.
But remember, the 2% was only introduced later on.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Suppose we did.
But it's here.
But we're talking about the $50 note this week.
But okay, so the point I wanted to make about velocity of money, because you seem to doubt that velocity of money has different velocities between cash and electronic. Am I right?
I don't think he's doubting it.
No, you're not right.
He's doubting it.
No, I don't think he's doubting it.
I'm actually saying yes, you're not right.
Yeah.
But, okay, but you're now going down a rabbit hole. I've been criticized for not letting us go down rabbit holes. So maybe let's go.
Okay. So what does velocity of money have to do with this? Why would the central bank care about velocity of money?
His argument is the higher the velocity of money, the higher the inflation. And in principle, he's right. In fact, not in principle. As a matter of fact, he's right.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
But I'm thinking, I think...
Okay. But can I stop you there? Because I'm vexed by what you just said. If the pool of money, if money supply is not growing, if there is no printing, why would a higher velocity of money lead to higher inflation?
There's studies about this, Rufaro, in all the books. It's a fact.
Okay, explain it to me like I'm
The faster that money goes around, basically creates money. The shorter the time I'm without money, inversely is true to the longer the time that I have money. And the faster that money is going around, I have money more of the time. I'm just explaining that as a layman. He'll probably give you bigger ways to explain it.
Maybe you're the economist. Perhaps you can do a better job than George.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me simplify it for you. If you have...
Yeah, pretend I'm sick. Didn't I just very simplify? Pretend I'm 6.
Okay. Yeah, no. 6-year-olds
I want to hear this.
Great as well. So if you have cash in a highly inflationary environment, what will you do with the cash?
I will buy something non-monetary.
You will quickly convert it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you have electronic money, if you think about it, to quickly convert electronic money into something, it takes longer than to quickly convert when you have cash. Would you agree?
Okay.
Right. So if you're quickly converting into a real product and you have cash, and it does the rounds 10 times more than electronic, would you agree that the velocity is higher with cash than it is with electronic?
No, I get that the velocity of cash is higher than the electronic, right?
This is why I disagree with both of you in this country. Because in this country...
No, but let him finish his explanation.
Let me finish my explanation so that we walk through with our 6-year-old. But he is right. I think the problem that we have with economists is we don't simplify things. And we don't explain things like we're explaining to 6-year-olds. And what I found very interesting is... the ladies at the street corners understand this, that when you have cash, that cash will move quite quickly. So there's a lot of buying that's happening with cash than there is with electronic. Now, what's the definition of inflation? It's too much money chasing too few goods.
Mm-hmm.
So if electronic dollar only chases the goods once, and actual cash chases the goods 10 times, clearly inflation will be much higher.
Okay, now I get it. That's a fantastic explanation.
So this is where I disagree, right? I don't know when the theory was written, but I imagine that at that time, using cash meant collecting it. As soon as you got money, you could reuse it. Whereas using money electronically or in any other form meant collecting it, putting it in a bank, and there were all sorts of clearing periods in between. In our current context in this country, with EcoCash and Telecash and One Wallet, and with Zipit, that's no longer true. As fast as you're collecting it, you can spend it. And that's probably faster than the cash, which requires you to physically move it from where you have collected it to the point at which you need to transact. Whereas On your cell phone, you can make a call and send money and acquire an asset or whatever transaction you were discussing with
I think I actually totally agree with your argument, but I think let's take the argument a little bit further. And how I would take it is this, that there are structural rigidities with transferring
big
money.
words.
What I mean is, for example, there's a limit to how much you can even transact electronically. So you find that the authorities have greater say in how we transact electronically than we would if I had my cash. No one determines how much cash I should use in a day. Whereas when you look at it electronically, there are all these challenges. I won't name the bank, but we all know where the queues are around transfers, the problems with just electronic transfers.
So you reckon they might be deliberately slowing down the velocity of electronic money?
I think it's very clear.
Well, just the system has bottlenecks and challenges. It just doesn't, it works at a level that's less than ideal.
It's excellent. So what do you do if you're a policy maker? Because remember, the problem is you're just creating too many zeros around your currency. So if it remains as electronic and you have a lot of these zeros, what do you do?
Well, I'll stop printing.
Just before we move away from this, I think that's an interesting note. And as much as I loathe to let Tinashe lecture, please can you help our viewers understand whether introducing a new note per se constitutes printing?
Yes, it is. In fact, that's the real definition of printing, is you print money, but they have been printing RTGS.
And this money doesn't magically end up in people's accounts, right?
Yes.
People had money in their accounts anyway, or were going to have money in their accounts anyway.
No, that's true. I think the discussion is around the philosophy, but it's one for one. If we're to trust them, that they will burn the RTGS and introduce the real notes and coins.
Yeah. Well, really, helping you paraphrase, what you're saying, the real crime is crediting somebody's bank account with non-existent money.
Yes.
Whether that person
it's money creation or printing.
Yes,
Whether you do it literally or electronically.
No, whether there's a new note in circulation or not, I can't magically have a new note in my pocket without money having been credited to my account in the first place.
Well, that's where the central bank is actually saying, no. What we're going to do is all the banks that have credits, RTGS credits with the central bank, we're going to take those credits and burn them.
And give you some paper.
Some paper. So we're meant to trust their word to that, and that they will carry it as such.
But either way, Uncle John is not going to go to the top of the building and shake a sack full of $50 notes. He's going to have to credit it to people's bank accounts.
Yes.
And the problem occurs, if we think it's increasing money supply is a problem. The problem is when a credit occurs in somebody's bank account.
Absolutely, George. You're right there.
Something else in the news, it's a couple of weeks old now, but it won't go out of the news, is this Kuvimba dividend. It's opened up so many discussions. We touched on it last week. Perhaps it's worth coming back to again this week, gents. So Kuvimba Mining House has been created. It's an amalgam of all these other mining houses that come from private hands, that come from state hands. But some of the discussions that we've had over our lunches and so on come back to the question, but wait a minute, didn't we previously have ZMDC and the likes of Jenna Mines? Why do we need Kuvimba? How is it different?
That's a good question. You've spent a lot of time researching this. I'm sure you have an opinion.
Yes, I do. I've got an opinion, but I'm like most people. We are still trying to get to the bottom of things. I think it's not very clear, but from what the government tells us, is that this entity is now owned 65% by the not by the government, but number of
public
entities.
entities.
So you've got the deposit protection, you've got the war vets, you've got the old farmers' deeds, they called it white farmers' deeds settlement. You've got diverse nominees, and then you have 20% as government of Zimbabwe. And you have the sovereign wealth fund in there as well.
Okay, so basically, these are public entities largely. And so we believe it's going to be run as a public entity. Recently on the same show, we were discussing how much of a mess our public administration is. Are we able to identify successes in the past where the government has successfully run business entities?
Well, if we lower the bar for success, yes, we are. we can identify institutions that did not fail, that are majority government owned. But when we compare them to their contemporaries, they're not the best performance. So if you think about in the banking sector, there's CBZ, there's ZB, which is majority state controlled.
Was.
Okay, touche. But during the era that they were majority state controlled, the banks that were run by foreigners or entrepreneurs have generally tended to perform better. And it's hard to think of a sector outside banking where there are state institutions that have not been hemorrhaging for years. So the track record is atrocious for parastatals and state-owned enterprises. So when you think about Kuvimba in that context, we would be much better off if it was being run by the private sector. If it was just sold off, right, and people with entrepreneurial flair and ambitions took it over and ran it, I think we'd be better off.
So would that be your recommendation?
Absolutely, sell it.
To those in charge?
Just list it on the ZSE or VFX and sell it to the highest bidder.
But these are sovereign assets.
They're mines. I mean, it's Unki Unki, Zimplats, and Mimosa are probably bigger than Kuvimba, and they're owned by foreigners. So and why do we care so much about BNC and Fred Rebecca and these other things in there?
All the dividend in the other ones goes abroad.
So, I mean, look, these guys...
It's our gold, it's our nickel.
Yeah, so when the major mining houses mine it, they pay for the rights, they pay royalties, and they pay taxes. We get our cut as a country, and the entrepreneur, foreign investor gets theirs. That's how things work.
Do you think this will work?
Well, I think I agree with what Rivaro has said, perhaps for different reasons. I think that if you think about, Barrick Gold, for example,
maybe help our viewers understand who's Barrick Gold.
Gold miner in the world, and its turnover is many times Zimbabwe's GDP. And to think, and they involve and they contract professionals who've been doing this for over, many years, and they get the best quality individuals to run these mines. To raise capital for Barrick Gold, for example, is more than Zimbabwe's debt on its own. So what I'm trying to say is Zimbabwe has the potential to be Barrick Gold. It's potentially, the resources are there, and we need managers and individuals and shareholders. Pure dedication is to do that. I can't understand why a state would want to do that. So you can't have a state that has defense forces, that has ZBC, that's running a whole lot of other litany of things, small little things, granted in the grand scheme of things, and then it wants to run a mining company as well. I think that there's a contradiction in terms there. And
but
I would say that a good government says, you know what, let the market be. Let's free up the constraints in the market. Let's allow mining companies, anyone who wants to mine, let them go out there and raise money. So the idea that a president goes to Russia or anywhere in the world and is looking for money for a particular gold mine, or a minister of finance for that matter, is going out in the world and looking for money for a gold mine, to me, it's a contradiction in terms there.
But okay, you pick Barrick Gold, big player in gold. Mm-hmm. Let's look at Saudi Aramco, the Saudi Arabian oil. You don't call it oil mining. Well, it's oil mining giant. I think the biggest in that field, the biggest or the second.
Well, it's the most valuable company in the world.
On paper. And until a couple of years ago, was 100% owned by the state. Mm-hmm. So how is it possible that it worked for Saudi Aramco, but wouldn't work for Coimba?
Well, okay, I think that when you say it's worked for Saudi Aramco, I think you're not considering the counterfactual, right? So
you got a lot of big words, eh?
Like, no, he's just saying what could have happened if it wasn't state-owned.
Okay,
right. So
there's wisdom in my kind.
They have this track record, the Saudi Aramco, right? And we don't have the benefit because they never ran the experiment of opening it up to free markets and saying, guys, run with it. It's conceivable that much more value would have been created if it was in private hands. And my intuition is that would in fact be the case. If the Saudis had opened up their oil industry to private players, they would have created much more value than they have. They, to their credit, haven't made a hash of it, right? They've created a ton of wealth via that vehicle, but I think that the counterfactual would have been much more interesting.
Excellent. I cannot add to that.
Do you guys agree?
It happens from time to time.
This might be the end of the series. Okay, so
I think the general principle is that governments exist to do work that free markets would struggle to handle. Okay, setting up an independent judiciary and that sort of thing. For-profit businesses generally are better run by the private sector everywhere in the world. There are no good examples of a government anywhere running a for-profit business better than the private sector.
So your unequivocal recommendation.
Big word.
I'm not as dumb as I
look. Do you even know what it means?
Is, look, having bought these things from private players, turn them into state assets, flip them back to private players again, and we'll all be better off for it.
Absolutely.
We do have a very good example.
Yeah.
If you remember the difference with the Dairy Marketing Board and the Grain Marketing Board. What has happened to the two? So when you liberalized the dairy industry, what happened is we've had many industry players coming into the market, and some doing way better than.
But we produce less milk overall.
Yeah, no, true. We produce less milk. We consume more milk, but we produce less milk. And the reason why that is so is because we are now importing. But that's besides the point. The point is the loss is not to the Zimbabwean people. Whereas GMB continuously every year, that loss is coming back to the Zimbabwean taxpayer.
But what about Kotco that we privatized and then we've nationalized it?
Well, it just shows you that in our hearts, we are still communists.
We're going back there. No, but why did we end up nationalizing it? It didn't work as a private entity, surely.
That's the nature of business cycles. So the nature of business cycles is it goes up and it comes down. And the nature of...
So it should have been allowed to fall.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the social cost? What happens to those Mount Darwin farmers who can't grow anything else?
There were many players who were willing to come into the Zimbabwe market and continue in the cotton industry. The model, the Kotco model, didn't work. And that's what the market was telling us. We have David Whitehead, another model that didn't work. But the good thing about...
And that's why you're wearing Chinese clothes and ice cream colored pants.
I don't know about Chinese, but I'm worried that your eye for detail is that hazy. But anyway, that's a joke. But
I can point you an ice cream that looks just like that.
the point is, business cycles and the ups and downs, it facilitates new entrepreneurs to come in and try out new things with their own money. Governments must not be continuously running experiments. Okay? So right now we've got a commodity boom, right? And it might seem that because Kuvimba has declared a dividend, all is well. But what happens when there is no commodity boom, when prices go further down?
Yeah, and also, look, when you say, I don't even, I think it's a stretch to say it seems all is well because they've paid a dividend, because we don't have context. That dividend is based on how much capital invested. So if they invested $10 million and they're paying $5 million in dividends, that's
superb,
amazing, right? But if they, if they invested hundreds of millions of dollars, then maybe that's not such a great outcome, right? We don't know. It's not in the public domain how these assets were put together, what was paid for them, what the cost of capital is, what the debts on the balance sheet looks like, and what the basis of this, dividend is. Is it,
did they get it from selling gold, or did they get it from selling assets?
What's the dividend cover, right? Are their earnings 20 million, 50 million, or do they make 5 million and pay it all out in dividends? How much are they reinvesting for growth? We don't know, right? It's just a number that's put out there.
You know what's interesting is, beside it being a public-owned company, a government-owned company, is we don't have a lot of details. We don't even know who sits on the board.
You never asked about this for Rufaro Marketing. Why didn't you care who sits on the board of Rufaro Marketing and runs those city council bills?
No, it's a good question. It doesn't take away the question. We should ask.
No, it's not defunct. So
I think even more fundamental is what is the rationale? What is the vision? Right? Why? I mean, what were the options when they actually put it together? And did they just?
And I like that debate, and we need to really contextualize. I think that there's a clash of civilizations in Zimbabwe and ideology.
That sounds dramatic.
It is. It's a clash of ideology.
I've been criticized so much for shutting him down, so I'm sitting here quietly and letting him go on with his drama.
You have people who totally believe in communism, who believe in nationalizing everything, that everything must be done as a commune. You have people who really believe in it. And then you have people who, like us, because, we can differ on a lot of things.
And we do.
And we do. But there are certain things that we fundamentally agree on. And there are lots of people like us, right? The younger generation, who do not understand why government must own all these assets. And that's the clash of ideology that I'm talking about. That up until these people can see sense in not owning these businesses, it's always going to be very difficult.
Or at least until we resolve this
clash.
Because
I'm using my term.
But I actually think that it's if it was a clash, we'd actually be better off. I don't think that it's a clash. I think that there's a lot of disingenuity at play here, where you have the state proclaim that it believes in free market capitalism, but consistently behaves like a communist. I mean,
has it ever claimed? I mean, what's command agriculture?
No, but okay. I think we touched on this a few weeks ago, and it was one of the rabbit holes that we didn't go down. I think, Tinashe, you touched on it, that there is a crisis between bureaucrats and policymakers, where perhaps the policymakers are a lot more left in terms of ideology than the bureaucrats, who might be moderate or right-leaning in terms of economic ideology. And this is why perhaps the two of you are not even in agreement what message you think you hear from the government, because it depends on who's speaking. When the policymakers are speaking, you hear a very left-leaning message. When the bureaucrats are speaking, you hear a very right-leaning message.
Yeah, and to agree with you, I think when you think of a bureaucrat and bureaucracy, what you think of is efficiency. And that's the sort of language that we'll talk about, right? And when you hear policymakers...
And yet 84% of their accounts are not... Anyway, that's a story for another day.
I mean, what they believe in, what's actually happening, that's the clash, right?
Yeah.
But it's efficiency, it's just in time. Those are the sort of messages that you want to hear. But from the policymakers, what do you always hear? Chinu, chelu. That's the language. It's ours. And that's why I say there's a clash of ideology. I cannot, we might differ on the extent of government's presence in an economy, but almost all young people and middle-aged.
Well, I don't know if you've done a referendum, but
I think if you ask an ordinary Zimbabwean and you ask them that, do they believe in socialism, communism, or capitalism? A lot of them will say capitalism. The idea becomes, what kind of capitalism do we believe in? And I think that's always what's contentious. But I think they're very clear that they do not want government meddling in their affairs.
Well, I think let's speak for ourselves, and let's let others maybe make up their minds over their own drinks what they believe in. Among the beneficiaries of the Coimba dividend is the sovereign wealth fund of Zimbabwe, and I know, Rufaro, over lunches this week, you've expressed very strong views about whether you think we should have a sovereign wealth fund at all or not.
Yeah, look, I think about it simplistically. If you can't afford necessities, right, food, clothing, and shelter, right, do you have any business spending money on luxuries?
But is a wealth fund a luxury or a saving? Shouldn't everybody have some savings?
Savings and wealth funds are different things. Okay, so you can have a bit of money put aside for a rainy day, right?
Isn't that what a wealth fund is?
No. A wealth fund, by definition, is aspirational, right? So, okay, let me give you a brief history.
Did you guys swap places this week?
More interesting.
Right. So, the first sovereign wealth fund in the world was founded by the Kuwaitis, right? They were making all this oil money, and it was excess to their requirements. Like literally, they had budgets, and they spent all the money that they felt they needed to, and they had all this excess being the operative word, money, right? And in 1953, they decided, you know what, let's ring fence this value, create an investment vehicle, and invest this money so that it grows, so that it's diversified out of oil where we're making our money, and future generations of Kuwaitis can benefit from this wealth that we're earning today, right? So by very definition, it is what you do with excess wealth that you create, excess money that you create, right? Beyond your needs, right? So if you're running a country that is falling apart at the seams, it's got failing infrastructure, it's got healthcare that doesn't work, it's got horrible educational outcomes, we are suffering in the middle of a pandemic, we're unable to get enough pandemics to, we've got all these
vaccines. No, we don't want more pandemics.
Vaccines. We have all these real issues that we need to address today, right? So,
but
how do we say we have
save?
No.
Should poor people not save?
Those are two different.
Should you set aside money for a rainy day?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
wisdom.
And
right?
where do you put it?
But should you be setting up a fund and calling it a wealth fund to invest when you aren't doing the basics at home? Does that make sense?
When you have NASA and you still think that you have...
It's kind of like, do you know what? Okay, let me give you an analogy.
That's a very interesting discussion.
Let me give you an analogy. I think that in a Zimbabwean context, we value education, right? And Zimbabwean parents are quite happy to make sacrifices to ensure that their kids have a quality education, okay? And now, how absurd would it be, right, to set up a fund for university education, right, while in the meantime, the kids aren't going to school,
But okay, and that no, but that raises an interesting question, because generally, when we look at the top sovereign wealth funds in the world, they're set up by resource-rich countries, and let's look at the Norwegian one, which is the richest sovereign wealth fund in the world. Basically, they've taken the decision that the money doesn't belong to the current generation anyway. So when they sell their oil and their fish, they basically don't spend any of that money. They put it in a sovereign wealth fund and pack it away and let future generations decide what they're going to do with it. So if you take that argument, then this generation is not going to school. Doesn't matter. This money belongs to future generations. Our responsibility is to safeguard it and let them decide what they'll do with it.
Yeah, but okay, I want to punch some holes in your analogy, because to begin with, in as much as the Norwegians have set this money aside for future generations, current generations get decent healthcare, have fantastic infrastructure, and have world-class state-funded education. Okay, so nobody's being prejudiced for the sake of these future generations.
But they haven't
this is excess.
But they haven't used the resource wealth to do this. The current generation has said, we've got our problems, let's fix our own problems.
And they're
with our resources. And let's use the mineral resources of the country, this natural bounty that God has given us. Let's use it, let's reserve it for future generations.
There's a way I can answer you. These are rich men's problems. And I do not understand why the 25th poorest nation in the world is having this discussion about rich men's problems. And I think
let's dig the gold out of the ground as quickly as possible, and let's fix our schools, let's fix our hospitals.
If you look at the Industrial Revolution,
and when do we stop?
The Industrial Revolution, because we haven't gone through our Industrial Revolution, right?
Well, we had one, and then we deindustrialized. But okay,
it's built on cottage industry. If you look at Japan, Germany, the US, Europe, it was built on cottage industries that grow into the big companies. And that's what we need to do. We need to increase the tax base. We have few people, few corporates that actually are contributing to the fiscus. And what we need to do is to have as many companies as possible.
But it sounds like you agree with me.
What our problem is. It's not sovereign wealth issue.
Oh, you're saying let's just ignore it?
Let's ignore.
But the question is, what do we do with the gold?
No, let's not.
And
what
do
we
we
do with the platinum money?
I'm saying what we do with the gold mines. What we do with is to liberalize the gold sector.
But we get these royalties, we get these dividends, we get these taxes. What do we do with it?
We actually deal with current problems.
It's not even that much. The royalties. There's a reason why government wants to go into the actual mining, because when they look at the royalties, they realize that it's less than 0.5% of the fiscus. It's not much. So their argument is somebody must be doing something bad, or someone is siphoning money out, and they need to be the ones mining, which is actually not what should happen. The royalties are not much, but what we need to do is you need to have, beyond a mining policy, but an ideological idea that let's liberalize the market. Let's have as many mining companies coming into Zimbabwe. That's what we need to do.
And when they've come, what do we do with the money? So Rufaro says, get the money, build roads, fix the schools.
It's not going to be enough. We probably need to employ people. Like, that's to
get the kids off the street. Stop smoking. Do you smoke it, Mutorio? Crystal meth. Stop taking it and let the kids be productive.
Let us all be productive. Let's increase. We need to employ 3 to 4 million people in Zimbabwe. So we need jobs. And the only way you do it is you need to invite as many of these big conglomerates, mining conglomerates, whether in agriculture, in mining, in tourism, to come, because they have the capital.
But the Germans didn't do this. The Germans didn't do this. The Singaporeans didn't do this. They did it on their own. The Koreans didn't do it.
They invited. You see,
you guys are being very complex about this. If you've been
I'm a simpleton.
Well, this conversation doesn't sound simple to me. Look, let me simplify it. If you've just had a car accident, right, and in a wreck, you've got cuts and bruises and broken bones, okay, your priority can't be getting a six-pack. Right? You need to actually fix your cuts and bruises, get a orthopedic surgeon to fix your broken bones, spend some time in hospital, and after that in physio, and get well before you think about going to the gym. Okay? And sovereign wealth funds are, in this analogy, going to the gym and working on a six-pack. And poor countries have no business doing sovereign wealth funds. We need to actually get our house in order. And then when we have excess cash,
then we can talk
then we
about
have the luxury of, okay, let's set up a fund. Where should we invest? What should the rules be? We can't be talking about that when, the country's in a mess.
Food for thought. Okay.
And it makes me wonder, so why do we have a sovereign wealth fund?
That was the question. Where were you 10 minutes ago?
After that, we need to
And he's the guy drinking coffee.
we need to come back to the original question, right? Because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we need to come back to the original question, and I'm asking you, why then?
You know what? You know what I think? I think the reason we have a sovereign wealth fund is it's an attempt to deal with ownership and custodianship
Of what?
of God-given resources. And I think what's clear is, at a certain level in this country, the thinking is we can't entirely entrust it to public enterprise and to private enterprise. And what you guys are saying is we can't entrust it to the state. But maybe there's a middle of the road approach, or there's an alternative approach.
There's NASA. What happened to NASA?
Yes. So you're saying instead of creating a new sovereign wealth fund, let's give it to NASA.
No, I'm saying let's fix NASA.
Yes, and entrust them to own these resources on our behalf.
And NASA.
Oh no. I mean, how did that even, no. Anyway.
Okay, he's a hardcore, we're both libertarians, but he's on the chaos side of the spectrum. I'm more on the small government side of the spectrum. I'm
a bit of a mix of...
No, you're not.
No. I think this is a conversation between Hayek and Rothbardian. So,
Okay, this is now going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make it very clear for Rufaro. But yeah,
I think maybe you guys can continue this over that stuff and.
Oh, basically, okay. Just to unpack what he said, which sounds like gibberish to most people.
Sounds like.
So there are libertarians that believe the private sector can do everything better than governments, which is why he would be an advocate of disbanding something like NASA. Whereas I think that there is a role in society for government, but it's a small role. So things like NASA are essential and important and shouldn't be disbanded, in my view. But government has no business running things like Kuvimba and a whole bunch of other parastatals. Their role should really be focused on public services. End of story.
I think that when we came up with this social contract that came up with the idea of the state and of government, it was really to protect our civil liberties. That you have an external party to us whose sole role is really to protect our civil liberties. And I think that on its own is a big job that government must do. And that's it. And it must end there.
Okay, I'm not letting you guys launch manifestos now. Look, I think it's been an interesting discussion. We've had we've touched on a lot of issues, and as usual, we don't seek to tell you how to think, because as you can see, we are not even sure how we think. But we seek to inspire discussions. In this current COVID environment, perhaps these are not discussions over drinks, but perhaps moments of quiet reflection at home. Let's think about, which way some of these things can go, Let's see if we can also allow ourselves to change the way we think, whether we can be open to new ideas, open to different ways of thinking. It would be really sad if we would take Killer T's view and continue to sing takazvarwa takangodaro atiregere kuita unhu hwegeto nekuti takazvarwa takangodaro. No, we can't be like that. A man must be able to change, or a woman. Anyway, we at the end of another discussion, we need to get home before we will be asked to present letters. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. COVID is real. Be good. If you can't be good at it.